I went to grad school in Madison in 69, 70, dropped out, came back, I believe, in 71, dropped out again, came back, I think, around 73. I'd been writing poetry for a number of years at that point. In fact, I had a book pretty much ready to be published with Morgan Press in Milwaukee. I happened to meet some other poets in Madison. I went to some kind of poetry gathering at the university, and I think Hannibal Plath was the first actual Madison poet I met. And it was through him that I sort of became aware of John Tushin and a whole bunch of other poets that were involved with Gallery 853. And at that point, Daniel Yopak, who was the director of that gallery, had established something called the Artist Research Workshop. But I went to a few meetings. In addition to becoming involved with a regular poetry series there with Hannibal and Tushin and a number of other poets, and Don Hilgenberg as well, I met Peter Berryman, who was a musician and a visual artist. And he and I and Daniel decided to put out a newsletter that would sort of talk about the activities at the gallery. And one of the main directions for this Artist Research Workshop was one of intermedia, multimedia, art, music, poetry, theater, performance, really whatever was creative was embraced by the Artist Research Workshop. And we talked about doing this newsletter that would be kind of a compendium of the activities there and would include maybe a little bit of some poetry reviews, some art reviews, some features about things, as well as the description of activities. So we started that in January of 1975. That was the first issue that Peter and I did. And that sort of led to, about 5 or 6 more issues. One of the innovations that Peter and I came up with, and probably Daniel as well, it's hard to remember who came up with what ideas, but was the idea of putting an original screen print or an original piece of art as the cover of every issue, which we did for at least 4 of those 5 issues. I think that led to the next phase, which occurred in 1976. After a couple of years of doing this, or at least a year and a half, we decided to put out a portfolio of artwork and poetry that would be actual compendium of real artworks. That coincided with the birth of a kind of a new organization at Gallery 853, which was called Madison Area Movement for the Arts, and then the portfolio became Madison Area Magazine for the Arts. Of course, that was short for MAMA, and we developed a whole philosophy of dealt with the idea of moving away from Dada into MAMA being a more positive thing rather than the kind of nihilistic and negative philosophy that Dada had been. We really sort of wanted to put a positive spin on this new movement that we were working on. By the time MAMA appeared in 76, Peter had dropped out of that situation, and it was basically kind of more Dan Yopak and I working on MAMA. And we sort of became the co-founders of MAMA. Maybe Daniel has better memory than I do. I don't really know who came up with the idea of MAMA or how that gelled. All I know is we kind of considered ourselves co-founders of that movement or that approach. There was a number of key events that happened, and sort of the birth of the MAMA movement occurred on May 2nd, 1976, when we did sort of what would, I guess, be labeled a happening by the Yahara River, Williamson Street and the Yahara River. We did a sort of a performance piece where Don Hilgenberg, a.k.a. Macho Tongue, was another name he went by, decided to throw a TV set into the river and then jump in himself as sort of a symbolic gesture of rejecting technology, rejecting commercial art, and being reborn in the river, in the Yahara River, as a new entity. He came out of the river, and there was a motorcycle gang that we also got involved with the performance, and we did sort of a parade with the motorcycle gang down Williamson Street with Johnny Rousseau tromboning when the Saints go marching in as we paraded down Williamson Street. This was this sort of key event that got written up in Takeover, which was an underground magazine at the time, and documented there. And that was in 76. Now, I should backtrack a little bit when we're speaking of Takeover, because in 1974, 2 years earlier, there was an article in Takeover called Life Among the Unicorns. This is really the first actual document that I think I have, the earliest one, talking about the establishment of the Artist Research Workshop, and this is pre-MAMA. I do notice that some images from one of my poetry books is in there, kind of reformulated as an ad for one of the poetry workshops. I was involved at that point. The article was by Don Hilgenberg, so that was that. It was a great time.